Hey everyone, Blade here, and there are a lot of reasons someone might make a discussion video, but I am making this video for a simple reason. I have a friend, Guru5, who had always wanted to get into the Fire Emblem series, but he didn't like the turn-based aspect of it, and he always said if there was an action-based game of Fire Emblem, he'd be down to play it. Fast forward to now, where not only do we have such a game, but I could introduce him to my favorite Fire Emblem lord, Claude. And he now hates him. And honestly, I cannot blame him. Now, before you comment in the comments about how this route is an improvement over what we got in the original game, or that it makes sense for Claude to fight Rhea, etc., let me assure you of this. I actually really enjoyed a lot of what they did in this game, and I do believe Claude fighting Rhea can make sense. But I believe the problem is that they didn't do a good enough job connecting point A to point B, thus leaving a lot of Golden Deer fans like myself feeling a bit mixed on the situation. And this is something that I think 10 minutes, yes, just 10 minutes of additional dialogue could have solved. As not bridging this connection from point A to point B is really important for Claude in particular. There are 2 points I want to mention that this video is going to be about, alright? So point 1, for Edelgard, Dimitri, and Rhea, 3 houses showed all 3 of them to have different sides to them. But Claude has always been the same. No matter if you side with him or against him, Claude has always been himself. And it makes sense. Edelgard, Dimitri, and Rhea have all nearly had their entire families killed off. Claude has his mom, his dad, siblings, and friends still around. Furthermore, he's an outsider, so he can take a different outlook on the conflict, not be as invested as the others are. So with that said, that brings us to point 1. This game already had a huge hurdle to clear by trying to take a character that has consistently been one way through the original game and show him acting much differently in this game. And I'll go on to add people's concerns about him not acting as intelligent as he normally is portrayed to be in this point, as well as what I'm going to introduce I think will have a different impact on how people will see those scenes in particular. It'll make sense later, but for now, just know point 1, explaining Claude's changes. That brings us to point 2. Despite how both games show Fargus to be an area that has the closest connection to the Church of Seiros, it is not Dimitri or Edelgard, but Claude who actually gets to have a conversation with Rhea post-time skip. He is the one who hears why she did what she did and the secret she was holding. And the final battle of the Golden Deer, which has an epic song by the way, is literally them fighting an enemy that has been trying to kill Rhea. Now, again, different circumstances. Rhea had already given up a position of power and, really wasn't in a state to fight for herself, but nevertheless, they did work with the Church of Seiros. Now, let's say you've only played the Golden Deer route of 3 houses. As I know, not everyone who played 3 houses played/saw all 3 routes, technically 4 routes. I know many people in particular who only played the Golden Deer route. With that being the case, I do think you need prior knowledge in order to play this game, but I'll at least say you should know the previous route before going into its equivalent in 3 Hopes. In other words, for the Golden Wildfire route, at the bare minimum, I think it would help for you to at least know the Golden Deer, because they could not fit every single thing into the game. And there were some underlying things that you might be confused about if you didn't already have prior knowledge. So let's take that. Imagine someone playing this route and seeing Claude go from fighting Edelgard and with the church in 3 houses to teaming up with Edelgard and killing Rhea in 3 Hopes. And it's more than just Rhea. Think about this. Unlike Edelgard and Dimitri, Claude was the only leader who could get ranks and supports with other members of each house. Annette, Ingrid, and Petra could all end up being with Claude and marrying him in the future. And not just them, even someone like Flame, very high up when it comes to the Church of Seiros, can end up marrying Claude as well. Yet aside from Petra, you end up fighting and not being able to recruit all of the other 3. Imagine having Claude and Flayn end up together in 3 houses and then find out that they are at odds with each other in 3 hopes. Not to mention you also have someone like Cyril, who is an Almiran. I know many people don't care for him, but for Claude's story, that should be addressed at least somewhat. That brings us to the second point. The game needs to give us a really good reason on why Claude needs Rhea gone when he rescued her and fought with her people in the past. And I do believe this game is so divisive because it didn't do a good job explaining those 2 points. So with that said, let's see how I would go from this game really upsetting half the fan base and making the other half excited about the changes for Claude to hopefully a more united and positive outlook on this route. I can't speak for everyone, but I do think this will help. Let's start with addressing point 2. Why does Claude need to fight Rhea? The first thing I'm going to bring up is a rather small thing, and I'm not sure. I've looked around in the community and haven't seen many people mention it. Maybe it's just something that people know, it's in the background, but something that we are introduced to in the beginning of Fire Emblem 3 Houses. Why Garreg Mach Monastery was even founded. If you're unfamiliar, let's play the clip. Have you heard?
I hear the Officers' Academy of the monastery was founded about 2 centuries ago. The eastern region of Fodlan was being invaded by Almyra, and so the Archbishop of the time took measures to prevent the border from being taken. In order to ensure Fodlan would be safe from potential threats, she deemed it necessary to raise a generation of excellence. That is how the establishment was founded, though its purpose has changed over the years.
Garreg Mach Monastery, not the church itself, but the Officers' Academy, it was founded because of the threat of the Almyrans. That's huge. Of course, when we first start 3 Houses, we don't know that Claude is an Almyran, and the Almyrans are kind of like we don't have a good idea on what they are, who they are. But by 3 Hopes, we should know, and that's where I think the first thing should come into play. Someone, doesn't have to be a high-ranking Church of Seiros members, it can just be a random grunt, should just mention to our main character why the Officers' Academy was formed and mention the Almyrans while they are around Claude. Now you might be saying, well, it was addressed in the original game, so why do we have to bring it up now? But we've already established they're trying to take a different approach on Claude's character. And in fact, since the beginning of the game, a lot of things are different. So a reminder of what is the same and putting emphasis on not only it, but also seeing Claude's reaction to that news is important. It introduces the idea rather early, and when I mean it needs to be introduced, I'm saying like right when our main character gets to the Officers' Academy, when they first meet the Golden Deer house. That would be an ideal time, around that time, before they end up fighting Shahid. That would be the perfect time to reintroduce.
The eastern region of Fodlan was being invaded by Almyra, and so the Archbishop of the time took measures to prevent the border from being taken.
Why that's important, we'll get to in a second. Because while that's great, that doesn't exactly fix the problem. You see, the real issue about Claude wanting to fight Rhea is that the Church of Seiros didn't really do anything to the Alliance. Or to our main character. I mean, sure, they were a bit heavy-handed on them coming to Garreg Mach, but I mean, that's not the worst crime in the world. It certainly doesn't deserve the whole order being, uprooted from its purpose. Causing a lot of deaths. Like, no. That's not enough. Furthermore, the game chooses to focus on the Agarthans and then the Almyrans and then Edelgard, leaving the church to kind of just fade into the background, especially since when we get into the meat of the game, Edelgard has already attacked the church. They're in a weakened state. They don't really seem like a big threat right now. One argument I have heard is that due to Claude not being in Garreg Mach for that long of a time, he doesn't learn enough about Fodlan, doesn't build a lot of those connections, and that explains his behavior in the past. It's not that I can't see why people made that argument, but for something like this, it needs to be in your face. This is the reason why, because like I explained before, this isn't Edelgard or Dimitri where we can clearly see, oh, they didn't go through these actions like the the Agarthans increasingly making Dimitri mad, or having Edelgard taking some compromising actions, and apparently her plans just not going according to her plan. We can clearly see those. But for Claude, we need something a lot more in our face on, yeah, this is why Claude will change his mindset. And for me, the idea that Claude would make decisions off of lack of knowledge doesn't make sense. A strategist, they gather all the information they can about something before they attempt to make a decision on it.
Actually, I was hoping to ask you about Rhea. There's so much we don't know about her, but I thought maybe you...
Oh, that's not a bad.
Yeah, I know more about Lady Rhea than anybody. But why should I tell you anything about her?
Idea. Claude acting in ignorance shouldn't be a thing. I would say that would make him more concerned about staying off to the sidelines, making sure he doesn't make a huge mistake when it comes to Fodlan, or try to gather information. If only there was someone that was near Claude who had access to the church's secrets, maybe did a lot of spying for the Church of Ceros in question, who could inform Claude on the ins and outs on how Rhea's mind would work and why that could possibly be an impedance to his goals. Oh wait, there is.
And you'll have me.
Oh, Shamir!
The name's Shamir. I'm a Knight of Ceros.
Shamir. This is where I really start to address this point too. Shamir, who coincidentally was my wife of choice in the Golden Deer and the first wife I chose for Fire Emblem Three Houses. Maybe it's just me, but when she appeared, I was paying close attention to her actions. And when we first got to the post-time skip in Three Hopes, and we met Shamir and we asked her, why she was here, she basically had a meta joke about, how the Golden Deer is the bow house, and that's why she's here. Why come to Leicester?
Hey!
Yeah.
And that's it.
All right. Shamir just said, look, I know the meta, all right? I'm a bow user. I belong here. While I did think that was funny, and I also made that same observation myself in the Golden Deer route, not to mention also that Shamir has the most supports with the Golden Deer, again, including Claude himself, Leonie, Raphael, and Ignatz. That is where they really missed their opportunity. Because the thing is, why is Shamir here? In Three Houses, it made sense. I got the impression that Shamir would be gone from Fodlan. In the Golden Deer route, when Shamir came back, Rhea was basically done. The Church of Ceros was looking for her. Shamir was basically free to go her own way. But she had gotten a close relationship with Byleth, like a lot of people did, and she decided to stick around for us, as it's known later on that Shamir had feelings for us. Again, maybe my perspective was a bit biased in this particular scenario, but I at least thought that we were Shamir's connection, her reason for coming back. But Shamir's never met Byleth in Three Hopes, at least by the post-time skip that we know of. And certainly Byleth isn't with the Alliance. Which begs the question, with Rhea still around, and Edelgard openly opposing Rhea if you wanted to go to that side, she could have chosen to go to the Empire or the Kingdom. But she doesn't. She instead decides to go to the Alliance and work for Claude. Why is that? Well, for that reason, we can possibly turn to a conversation she had with my top wife of the game, Happy. People thought I was just fanboying over those moments, and yes, I was, but I was also, my mind was active, and I was thinking. You see, in a support that Shamir and Happy have, we find out that the statue that is in the Abyss is actually one from Dagda, where Shamir was from.
Abyss is where I offer my prayers to my gods. It is the only place.
To yours.
The goddess of Fodlan is not one of my gods, but the statue here is not one of my gods either. I offer my prayers here all the same, because Abyss is where it is allowed.
The heck, man? Rhea? This ain't right. Yes! Wait a minute, you have something to do with that?
So that pagan statue, it's actually of a Dagdan deity.
Now, for all intents and purposes, I do think Rhea has taken good care of Shamir. I don't think she's done anything to warrant malice. So that's not the approach I'm going with. I don't need to make Rhea to be a villain for this to work. All I need to do is put her at odds with Claude. And this is an important part. Shamir went with the group when they fought Shahid pre-time skip of Three Hopes. She was in the perfect position to hear a possible conversation that Claude was having involving the Elmirans, possibly with Holst. My thinking is that adding a small scene to the conversation that Claude and Holst already have on why he let Shahid go. If Shamir overhears Claude saying that he had hoped one day that the Alliance and the Elmirans could put aside their differences and work together for the betterment of both their peoples. While Claude might not say that to anybody at this point, I think Holst, who we see later on at some point he and Nadir had met, they became brothers, I could see Claude saying this to Holst, seeing what his character is like, and with him being the general literally on the front line, something that he thinks Holst might literally be able to get behind. So, his men isn't constantly dying for this. So my thinking is Shamir overhears this conversation, and that gets her thinking. She doesn't know what the other leaders are like, but Claude at the very least has something that she might get behind. Accepting different cultures, like, for example, someone like her from Dagda.
I intend to tear down the walls that separate Fodlan from the outside world.
Okay.
I want to let people and goods come and go freely, and in doing so, eradicate prejudices about the outside world.
Huh?
Would it even be possible to achieve such a thing? It directly contradicts the Seros tenets.
And thus, that is the reason why Shamir decides to join Claude and not Edelgard or Dimitri. And the important thing is they have this conversation when the post-time skip starts. We see Claude take Shamir aside because, like me, Claude would also wonder why Shamir isn't currently with the kingdom, where the other knights would be, or with Edelgard if she wants to be opposed to Rhea. And this is where Shamir can inform him that she might start off slow, that she just wants to change, but then she can also confide in Claude and say that she liked what she heard when they first had fought all those years back then. That Claude seems like someone who would accept people of all walks of life, even someone like her, which Claude can then ask, oh, you think that the church doesn't? To which then Shamir can say, it's not that they're hostile, but outsiders aren't exactly treated the best in the Church of Seros. Now again, as far as I know, Rhea herself treated Shamir kindly. But from what I know about Rhea, she wants to keep things in order. She has seen what happened when humans got too much power, and from her perspective, the Agarthans in the past attacked Sothis, trying to take her power, and had a whole genocide of her people. So to make sure that they wouldn't come after her, and to try and keep a lid on the people of Fodlan, make sure that they don't get the same amount of power that the Agarthans had, and therefore try to attack and take them out again, Rhea's tried to limit humanity from advancing to a certain point, such as discovering oil or inventing telescopes and being able to see the stars, thus making people question on the fact that Sothis is actually out there. And yes, both of those facts are in the library of the Abyss, when you get that in the DLC of Three Houses. And it's the age-old argument of us getting so much progress that we would destroy ourselves. There's the idea of, now that we have atomic bombs, if they all go out, if we have nuclear warfare, if we'll just wipe out the human race. I think that's similar to what Rhea's mindset is. That if she keeps technology at a manageable level, she can keep things in order. That also means it's very risky for people to make contact with outside nations because she can't exactly control the actions of the other areas. If they start trading and collecting information, then her handle on the knowledge of the people of Fodlan have will be out of her hands, and they'll progress in spite of her.
In our
absence, future generations are likely to repeat the foolish actions of their ancestors. And when that happens, who will be left to stop them? This land has suffered enough as it is. I will fight with all my strength and spirit. For my mother, for the future, even for humanity.
I think that's the real reason on why Rhea is handling things as she has. But that's something only a select few, I doubt even Shamir would know. That's something that I expect Seth, Flane, that's a type of group I think that Rhea will let know. Maybe some other higher ups, don't know, but nevertheless. The point is that for Claude's purposes, it'll look like Rhea doesn't like other walks of life. Definitely something that's concerning, but Edelgard currently is the bigger threat at the moment. But now we have two moments where it seems like Rhea will impede Claude's progress, even if it was a time of peace, to where if you wanted to unite the Alliance and Elmira, that Rhea would be in direct conflict. But still, not the main threat. Until we get to Shahid Part 2. Let me make a side note about Shahid. I've been waiting to speak about him. This is gonna lead into my point 1 on why is Claude gonna change so much. Because from what I was seeing, Claude was pretty much himself until Shahid died. But they kind of just said, okay, Shahid died, and now all of a sudden Claude's gonna do this other action which just so happened to coincide with his death, but wasn't really inspired by it, at least to me. You'll see what I mean by inspired when I explain what I mean, but let me speak about Shahid first. I thought he was so underutilized. We have people like Edelgard's father, who we saw was a big part of her life, so was her mother, which was also Dimitri's stepmother, Dimitri's father, his uncle. Now we got a lot of Edelgard and Dimitri's family members who are very present in the story and have a significant impact. I was hoping that Shahid would finally be that one for Claude. I actually wanted to see his father too, because we got to see, the other previous kings or emperors, I would like to see the king of Elmira, but, we didn't get to see him. All right. But at least Shahid. But Shahid just seemed like a one-note villain whose purpose, you could pretty much cut him out. He basically just seemed to exist to impede Claude when they were about to succeed. Oh, Shahid's attacking. Now I am suggesting something that not only makes Shahid's purpose a lot more impactful into the story, but also can be the defining character change that Claude needs and a solution to what's going to happen next, Claude teaming up with Edelgard. That's still going to happen, but in a much different way. Let me explain. How's this all going to come together? Well, I already used Shahid's first attack to add in Shamir seeing Claude, talk about wanting the peace between his people and the Elmirans, to Shamir then joining Claude for hearing that exact reason. But now we're going to go a step further. Despite everything I said, I still don't think we have enough that seals that gap completely. So when Shahid attacks for the second time, everything's going to go the same exact way. Claude will meet Shahid on that ledge, and he'll end up taking that step forward and taking Shahid out himself. The difference is, Shahid was said to make an attack, the biggest attack they've experienced in over a century. That's not something to be taken lightly. And even the Empire had guessed that that is where Claude was going. I'm thinking, if I'm in the kingdom and I hear this and you're currently on good terms with the Alliance, what I am proposing is that Rhea herself, along with those of them who can fly on Wyvern Riders, as that's currently the only way that they think they could make it to the Alliance in time, as boats were a huge issue later in the game, that Rhea brings herself and just a group of flyers just to see if they can help out, because if the Alliance falls and the Elmirans enter Fodlan, then that could be game over. I mentioned flyers because that not only brings Seth, but also Cyril as well. This gives Cyril an impact to the story as well, but we'll get to that. So, Rhea's coming, we're having the party, you have Holst and Nadir chilling with each other, and right when they're doing this, Rhea comes in. Or, she's invited in by an Alliance soldier who gets Claude and says, hey, Lady Rhea's here with the Force, she'd like to speak with you. And then Rhea and Claude have a conversation. Now Rhea came to help Claude, right? There should be no issues. And she says as much, saying she came as quickly as she could with some trusted soldiers so she could help fight the Almiran threat. And then she pauses because she sees Nadir sitting with Holst. And here's where we get to the game changer. Rhea is worried for multiple reasons. One, it could be because if Claude has managed to make peace with the Almirans, and that could bring a threat to the stabilization that she's had for Foltland for nearly a millennia. Well, I don't like to think of it like that. That is certainly something she could think about. But another thought that she could think is simply that the Almirans just had the hugest attack in over a century. They're more of a threat now, or at least mindset-wise, you would think that they're more of a threat now than ever before. They're dangerous. And she sees Claude, very young, very new to the role of being leader, and she thinks that there is a chance that he could be putting the Alliance in danger with his actions. Both of those, I think, are reasonable approaches on why Rhea will react how she will react, which is saying that Claude needs to remove Nadir from the premises. Now, Rhea having no knowledge that, of course, Nadir, someone very close to Claude, Claude's Almiran himself, she's looking at him as the Alliance leader. They shouldn't take any chances, or she might even want to take Nadir prisoner for questioning. Doing that brings up a point that has gone often unnoticed when it comes to Fire Emblem Three Houses and Three Hopes. Can Rhea's will supersede even the leader of one of the other three nations? This puts it in direct clash. Because now we get to see, okay, is Rhea's word more important than Claude's in this case? Now, with everything I've said, I think just the idea of these two parties meeting is enough to see how bad this outcome could be. But just in case, here's a general outline of how I think things would go. Obviously, first off, Claude would come to Nadir's defense, saying that he helped them fight against the Almiran threat. Then Rhea could come back saying something along the lines of, how do you know this isn't also part of their plan? In case it seems that they could not conquer Foltland at this time, even with the amount of forces that they mustered, then their backup plan would be to integrate the Almiran forces and take over Foltland from within. Rhea possibly taking inspiration from what the Agarthans have recently did, but also unknowingly putting Claude on guard because that could possibly hint at what he is doing right now, which completely freezes him up on the notion that Rhea might actually know who he is, but she doesn't. Then Holst could come in, saying that he can vouch for the character of Nadir, because by this time Claude had definitely had them meet before the battle, and they've been fighting each other for a long time already. Holst might also weigh in that it was the Almiran royalty that was actually responsible. And this is where Cyril being here is important. Cyril is an Almiran, and he's one that Rhea actually trusts. And not sure if people remember, but Cyril doesn't have a good opinion on the Almirans.
They just start fights like this sometimes. It's so they can show off how strong they are.
Really?
I think it's pretty dumb. I mean, people are getting killed. And why? So some guy can think he's tough? After every fight, they do a big feast and everybody eats and dances and there's music. It's supposed to honor the dead, but I figure they just like to make noise.
Wow. Feeling homesick?
Nah, I'm where I belong now, and I don't really like Almira.
Yeah, I can see it on your face.
They want to show how tough they are, then they ought to look after kids who've lost their parents.
True. So his word is gonna hold weight for Rhea. More than Claude's because, again, Rhea doesn't know that Claude is Almiran. So Cyril comes in and denounces the Almirans, saying that all they really care for is battle. And he backs up Rhea in her assertions. And then Hilda comes in. And this is important because this doesn't just involve Claude involving himself with Rhea. It also involves House Gonril, his biggest supporters. As well as Hilda can suitably represent the Golden Deer team as well, showing how they might feel about the circumstances. But more than that, Hilda actually knows Cyril. He used to work, he was kind of a servant.
I got captured in the battle at the Locket, and that's how I ended up here. So I'm kind of worried that other kids who lose their folks might not be so lucky.
Huh. Well, I mean, I know what he means.
Before Lady Rhea took me in, I had a real hard time as a servant of House Goneril.
Oh, you were their servant?
I'm sorry to hear that, but it's not like I'll go around snapping up all Myron children.
Well, then how'd that happen, Hilda?
That's good, but I want to see things for myself, so I know that everything's okay.
Nevertheless, this gives Hilda room to talk at this conversation, and she can therefore back up Claude and her brother in defending Nadir, because obviously she trusts their judgment heavily, and she would surely want to back them up, and she could say something along the lines of, Jill shouldn't judge one person based off of those stereotypes.
All of you overcame the barriers of birthplace, status, and ideology. Having gone through so much with all of you, I have no doubt that, in time, you'll understand.
I guess there were a lot of different people there. People we wouldn't have met through the normal course of our lives.
And this allows Sedith to come into conversation, because the thing is, Nadir's not just a normal Almiran. He is one of the most known Almirans, and then Sedith can bring up his name, Nadir the Undefeated. He's no ordinary Almiran. He's been at the forefront since he and Holst have fought plenty of times. He's been one of the people who's been attacking the Alliance. That's all Rhea needs to put her foot down and demand that Claude remove Nadir from the premises one way or another. Nadir, seeing this and clearly not wanting to be the cause of Claude coming at odds with the church, decides to leave himself, maybe with an escort of Alliance soldiers, or they can just let him leave. And with that being good enough for Rhea, she decides to exit, telling Claude never to trust the Almirans. Nothing good will come from it. Again, with the idea that Rhea is trying to help Claude in this position, but Claude can only see that as a threat because he is Almiran. And then there's the idea, what if Claude reveals who he is? What if it comes out that he is an Almiran? How will Rhea take that? Will she want to get rid of him, try to take him out? That's always a possibility. Furthermore, it seems that talking to Rhea as he is trying to do right at this moment, which is my big thing, Claude can actually try talking to her and Rhea's just not hearing him. It could be Shahid's actions really reinforcing why it just doesn't seem like a good idea, because they just attacked in massive numbers. It's like, how would anyone from the Alliance think now is a time that we can make peace with these people? And this is where we can have that scene where Claude and our main character off to the side, because our main character just heard that Claude is Almiran, and not just our main character, but also the audience. If for some reason they hadn't played Three Houses, now we all know Claude's Almiran, that was his brother, and now Rhea is unknowingly saying she'll never accept his people. That's got Claude thinking about what he can do about this. And then you can tie that into when our main character and Hilda were talking to Claude about seizing power.
What I'm saying is, you should do what you think is right, with enough vigor to blow any creases clean off your face.
Honestly, Hilda, I don't know what to do. Is my way really the right path forward? It feels like I'm rejecting everything Lester used to be up until now. Like I'm tearing something important away from the people who need it most. Are you sure you won't regret lighting this fire in me?
I don't know, maybe I will. I'll probably get mad at you at some point too. But I know how hard you work to keep the Alliance heading in the right direction. You're the smartest leader we've ever had, Claude. If I was a betting girl, I'd say you're gonna come up with the best plan ever, without a doubt.
If Rhea came in and made it seem like his power over the Alliance wasn't absolute, number one, and number two, that she would never accept the Almirans, that leaves Claude with only one option. If he can't ever get her to see the possibility that they could be close allies with the Almirans, as it's been hinted throughout the game that could be an issue, but now Rhea herself has confirmed it, us as the audience can basically see where Claude's mindset has to go. He has to defeat Rhea. And this puts Rhea over Edelgard, because now Claude's goal isn't to defeat Edelgard. Claude's goal is peace between the Almirans and the Alliance, and currently Edelgard is preventing that from happening because she's starting a war. So now, instead of Claude saying that he's teaming up with Edelgard because he wants to end the war as quickly as possible, this is where Claude's saying, alright, I have to be a really low down dude and use the war for my own benefit. My goal isn't necessarily to end the war. My goal is to eliminate Rhea, because as long as she's around, there's a chance that she will heavily prevent any progress between the Alliance and the Almirans from linking up, thus completely changing how we look at future events. Now, with that being said, there's only one more thing that we need to address, and coincidentally, it is actually the moment my man Kuru 5 decided he was done with the game. You might think it's when Claude teamed up with Edelgard, but it's actually the conversation they had afterwards. And this needs to be addressed because this is what sets the mood and the goal of the team going forward. And while I think most of the lines can stay the same, there's just a few tweaks that I might want to make, and this might push the changes I'm going to make a little over 10 minutes, but we need to address this. One thing I've noticed in Three Houses is that there was a defining moment which told the teams that this was the direction they were going to be going in, and gave the team, I guess, a little bit of proof or evidence for going on that certain path. The biggest one is the Black Eagles. When Byleth chose to go with Edelgard, Rhea transforms into the Immaculate One and thus gives credit to what Edelgard was saying. For Dimitri, he sees that Edelgard is actually the Flame Emperor. Things aren't what they seem, and he thinks that she has something to do with the tragedy of Dusker. Now, she actually didn't, but the point is, he assumed so, and that pushed a lot of events going forward. But the Golden Deer in Three Houses, while we also got the Edelgard reveal, it didn't have as much to do with us until Edelgard actually attacked us. But this is why I wanted Hilda to take part in the conversation with Rhea. The entire Golden Deer team was actually there, seeing that conversation, as they were there with the party in the original version of the game. You know, with Holst and Adair, they weren't afraid of him, anything like that. The reason it's important for them to be there is the way the conversation is going to go when Claude and Holst bring the others into their plan. Because Claude's main goal seems to be, in the original game, taking out Rhea to end the war. At least that's what it seems to be, but so many times when that logic seems to only go so far, Claude then turns into Edelgard for a second and says,
Besides, they're harboring the Central Church, and I can't condone that.
we need to take down the church, the crest system, and this, that, and the third. I don't want Claude to be Edelgard 2.0. If I want Edelgard, she's got her own route. And there will be no need for Three Houses, or Three Hopes in this case. Claude should have his own reasons for doing what he's doing, which is why I spent all that time building things up. And not just his own reasons, but reasons that his team can get behind. I kind of felt like Claude was fighting his team and forcing them to do something that they really didn't want to do. But this time, instead of Claude saying that we're taking out Rhea so we can end the war as quickly as possible and maintain some independence after the war is over, because as I said before, if you've played Three Houses, you already know Edelgard's not going to stop after Rhea is defeated, because she had captured Rhea before the Verdant Wind, the Golden Deer post-time skip, route started in Three Houses. Furthermore, the game even tells us, through a conversation with Edelgard and Hubert,
perhaps it's time we focus the entirety of our armies on the Kingdom front and cease our attempts to conquer the Alliance through military means.
Yes, through military means.
they're clearly not done trying to conquer the Alliance, even if they stop using military means. Which is why a lot of people keep on saying how Claude looks dumb in this situation. But it's different if Claude's goal is to take out Rhea. He tells everyone that right now it's not the best idea to go head to head with the Empire. So we can use this time where we're not fighting to take out another more easier target, Rhea. And this is where I say a lot of the lines that are in this original scene will stay the same.
To be clear, this is not a repudiation of the teachings of Seiros themselves. All we're aiming for is the dissolution of the Central Church.
That would mean killing Lady Rhea.
Is that really the right thing to do?
I've always been skeptical of that dogma they preach. It's just a way for them to force their own belief system onto everyone else. Their creed legitimizes Fodlan's system of nobility, which values crests above all else and leaves no room for people of different backgrounds or faiths.
But this time, instead of pretty much only relying on Edelgard's document to back up what Claude was saying, I don't know if you noticed, but they say if what the Empire says is true a few times too many.
Those two aren't what they seem to be. If what the Empire says is true, that is. And if what the Empire says is true, then I couldn't even begin to count the number of crimes the Central Church has committed.
Considering that they were the force who was literally attacking them, and that Claude and Holston seemed to believe what Edelgard was saying when they met her in that meeting.
You launched an unprovoked attack against us after all. We'll take tangible resources over insincere apologies any day.
Nonsense. You hastily resurrected some dusty old sect and appointed the Empire's own Minister of Religious Affairs as its bishop.
Look, the Empire is obviously trying to use us as a means to their own end.
Okay.
But do you honestly think I'd agree to a deal that sets them up better than us? I'm using them right back.
To rely on her words to go to war is definitely not something you want to do. But Shamir, someone who actually knew Rhea in the past, who is under Claude's employ, who can verify some of the things that Edelgard had wrote on, as well as them actually seeing Rhea herself and making their own conclusions. And all the buildup that we've seen, while true, I don't think his team will be fully on board, but at the very least, I think they'll have more of a reason to go towards this path than what Claude was saying before. Like bringing up things like the kingdom actually attacked them first.
But if you look to our history, you'll see it was the kingdom who tossed us to the wolves first.
That to me seemed like the most un-Claude-like thing to say. And instead of him saying he can't condone them harboring the Central Church, something more along the lines of, I don't want to attack the kingdom, but as long as they are going to aid Rhea, a conflict with them is inevitable. Slight changes that more convey Claude's approach. A big part of this being Holst. I didn't mention often in my playthrough, but I did not like how they just wrapped Holst along with Claude's plan. One of the best generals of the Alliance who would certainly care about how his soldiers have been treated. He is meeting with the person who is responsible for the deaths of his men, and yet he's going along with their plan that, yeah, the Central Church needs to be removed. Again, the issue being that there was no reason, but in the additions that I've made, Holst has a reason. He considers Nadir to be a brother.
Well, that right there nearly moved me to tears.
Really?
Before long, we were drinking and celebrating our newfound brotherhood.
Your newfound what now?
Ah, I take it you're Holst's sister.
Oh.
Then that makes you my sister too. It's a pleasure to meet you.
And certainly, wanting to strive for peace between his people and Holst's own is definitely something he wants. Especially when you consider that House Gonril has been responsible for defending the border, I don't have an exact number of how long, but you know, a pretty long time, and would be in the future if peace was not established. So while Claude himself might not be enough to get the team to fully want to do this, having General Holst also co-sign Claude might make them say, all right, it might not feel the best, but this is definitely something that we can strive for. Because if the Alliance no longer has to worry about wars with Elmira in general and can instead benefit from them, then that can catapult their standing in Fodlan in the future for generations to come. And that's the approach the team takes going forward. And then everything else can just happen as usual. Let's play a few clips.
I told you before, I'm not part of the Knights of Saros anymore.
But Catherine, though.
But we're gonna be fighting Catherine this time. Didn't you two used to be real close?
We were partners back then, but that's all in the past. Now we walk our own paths. I won't hesitate to do what must be done.
Now that I've taken this first step, there's no turning back. Not after what I've already done. These hands will never be clean again.
Are you referring to this battle, or are you referring to what you did to your brother?
Despite our declaration of war on Lady Rhea and the Central Church, the individual churches in our cities and villages have remained calm.
It's the same in Ordelia territory. My father didn't try to sugarcoat the news when he announced it to our people. But surprisingly, there haven't been any signs of disorder.
The same goes for Goneril territory. If anything, things seem more stable now than before. That's why I'm able to keep fighting alongside all of you.
Because of no Almirans.
This is also true of Egmont territory.
I guess no one in Leicester is all that upset about Lady Rhea becoming our enemy then.
I doubt most commoners would even recognize Rhea. So I guess it makes sense they wouldn't care too much about her.
And what would Edelgard's next project be? Leicester.
Yep.
Making us a vassal of the Empire.
So why'd you do this, Claude?
The Empire takes control of us, and Fodlan's one big happy family again. I don't think that would come as a shock to anyone.
So, what are we gonna do about it?
We yank out the root of this conflict ourselves. We'll bring the war to an end on our own terms.
By root, I assume you are referring to the Central Church?
I am. They're the one and only reason we're cooperating with the Empire, right? That's the Empire's entire moral argument for this war. If they were to continue fighting after the Church is eliminated, it would be nothing more than blatant aggression.
But is it even possible to destroy the Central Church without conquering Fargus?
That's why we're going straight for the capital. Dimitri's going to answer that question for us.
Rhea.
No matter how many years pass, you people will always be little more than fools.
Why can't we get more of that?
Return the land you stole from us. You've chosen to side with Edelgard. I am disappointed in you, Claude.
No hard feelings, Rhea. I'm just determined to see what the world would be like without you.
Yeah, after a little build-up. Like, the plot line that I'm envisioning is here, but it had no middle. Claude just switched to this all of a sudden.
The Church even forbids any official contact with outside regions.
This right here. Okay, I can't hide it forever, I guess. Let me just tell you all. This point, this was what I was gonna base the video on. This one line could put him at odds with Rhea and make it to where he would have to fight her in the future. But they didn't build it up like this. And like I said, trust me, there is a lot I'm going to go into, but this is the core. When I say that Claude has a good reason for ending up with fighting Rhea, this is it. Leading to where we get to the ending of the game, where Rhea is literally wondering, why on earth is Claude attacking me? I've done nothing to him.
Are you sure you don't want to just walk away? It's not too late.
I did not go looking for this fight, but you will not see me run from it.
And it just seems like no matter what I do, no matter how I try to keep Fodlan together, they're still gonna just rise up against me. Because Claude can never tell Rhea who he is.
I'm not here to talk about who started this war. I'm gonna end this. That's what's important now.
Doing that after Rhea's hardline stance, and even without that hardline stance, it's risky to even tell the Alliance who he is. He could lose all his power. He could be removed from being Durigan. He could be hunted down and killed. There's so many things that could go wrong with Claude if he tells Rhea what he's doing. So because they can never talk things out truly based on how events went down, they have no choice but to fight each other at the end. And that actually turns the ending from one that I was very frustrated on to one I actually like. Because even without Rhea knowing what Claude is doing, Claude's lying to Rhea when he says,
"This world cries out for change, while you keep it shackled to the past,"
can now tie into what was happening with the Almirans, with people from Dagda, and unknowingly to Claude, how Rhea would clamp down on Fodlan's own progress. What Claude was saying was true. We just didn't have the connections apparent in the story, but with what I've said added to the story, then that makes it a lot better. They literally have two different perspectives, and Claude's goal threatens Rhea's goal. They're both trying to do for what they think is best for Fodlan, and that turns it into a battle of ideals. Exactly what I wanted from the beginning. And for me, that's all that I would need to turn this story from being incredibly frustrating to that was something that was pretty good. I mean, I would like the ending to be extended as well, but when we see Claude trying to defeat Rhea strictly for the purpose of ending the war, and Edelgard and Dimitri are clearly not going to stop because, you know, Dimitri still doesn't want to be under the Empire, and Edelgard's trying to have everybody under the Empire, you know, that whole thing. Doesn't look good for Claude. It's like, okay, they're going to keep fighting.
I'm just not so sure how well this plan was thought through.
But if Claude had wanted to take out Rhea because she was the biggest threat for him and his goal, then he succeeded. And they can fight the rest of the war out and see who comes out on top later. But Claude's biggest threat now became Rhea. And I think that is something that even my boy Kuru5, who was a fan of Rhea, can get behind, because one thing that it didn't mention, while I saw him playing the game, he saw how Sothis was acting about taking over Violet's body, you know, right before Shahid came for the second attack.
You stand before my throne. If you so wish, then take a seat. But know then that your flesh is mine to wield.
So you would tell us about that. He was disturbed to see Sothis act like that, and that's also something that was never made as apparent, at least in the Golden Deer route. Like, there were small hints there, and you had to kind of thread the needle and see, okay, so this is what was happening. But to hear Sothis say it, and with such confidence, that can get you thinking that, all right, maybe Sothis' family isn't what we thought they were. Because Sothis never truly got her memories back in Three Houses until the very end. So even he was starting to question some stuff about Rhea, but they didn't give him enough. They didn't give me enough. With what I added, which again, I think it's just 10 minutes. Yeah, one scene in the beginning explaining how the Officers Academy was founded to fight the Almirans. Then you have Shamir explaining to Claude why she's here. And as she's someone who's close to Rhea, Claude can take stock into what she's saying. That in combination with the absolute bombshell of him having to take out a family member, and then right after doing that, Rhea says that she doesn't want to work with any Almirans, thus putting a hard stop on many of the plans he would have had after the war. It leaves him with no choice. When Edelgard comes for the option of teaming up, he can feign the option of teaming up, but phrase it in a way that where he's really pulling the strings of a lot of people to get the goal that he wants. I mean, maybe you can add some small stuff, like when Judith finds out the truth on who Claude is, that Claude tells Judith that because of how Rhea is, that's what he's really doing all this for. But that, I think, puts him back in the role of master tactician. He's not just teaming up with Edelgard because he agrees with her methods. He's teaming up with Edelgard because he's using Edelgard like she's using him to get rid of a threat. And it also doesn't make Rhea be this villainous person who's trying to burn down cities. No, none of that. She's just trying to protect Folan the way she is, and that way is interfering with Claude's goal. So, I have been waiting to say that for a good long minute. Please, everyone, let me know what you think of my revisions down in the comments below. If you think that wouldn't have made a difference for you, if you think it would have made a difference for you, because I'm not trying to act as this is fact, but definitely for me, I couldn't help but look at it as they had all the pieces they needed. They literally talk about Shamir having a piece of her culture under Garrick Mach, but they never address why she is here with the Alliance in the first place. They have Shahid do stuff, but they don't really make a connection between his death and Claude's actions. Him suddenly agreeing with Edelgard has nothing to do with Shahid's death, but him having a conversation with Rhea because of Shahid's actions that makes him realize that she has to be dealt with is different, at least for me. So with that being said, overall, I still really liked a lot of what we had in Three Hopes. I wish that this could have gone a bit differently, but I don't regret playing the game. And most of all, I miss my team of Golden Deers. Claude still has a very special place in my heart, despite what has happened. But that's all the more reason why I wanted to make this video. Give my thoughts on when people say, can you write something better? This is my attempt at saying, well, here's what I would write that I think would make a lot more people more comfortable with Claude's actions. With that being said, Please, please, please post your own thoughts about this down in the comments below, and I will see you all in the next video.